right, we now have the latest GDP numbers. They were just released, and just quickly, month over month, down 0.3%. Year over year, we are up 0.7%. We're joined by Dominique Lapointe, Director of Macro Strategy with Manulife Investment Management. Dominique, thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning, Roger.
Any surprises in those numbers to you?
It's a surprise that we have a contraction, minus 0.3. We haven't seen that kind of contraction for quite a while. And so we were already expecting a weak print this morning at 0, which is not a good number. But 0.3 is certainly showing us that, as far as I've seen, the tariffs are hitting good producing industries more than what we thought, and that the stabilization that we would like to see in the economy, it hasn't happened in August, and it's unclear that it's going to happen in September and going into the fourth quarter.
Was there any specific drags that you saw that really made the biggest impact in that number that just was released?
Yeah, so I still need to go through all of the numbers right now, but I did see that the goods producing industry, like I said, was the biggest factor. And I think that the question will be, are we seeing more of a services slowdown in the economy, which would be more concerning, because so far the reason why we haven't seen more broad-based weakness is that services industries like retail, hotels, restaurants were still faring good. Even finance was doing fine. If we start to see the slowdown there, I think it's going to be more concerning for Canada overall.
And what would be the biggest worry if there are slowdowns? Like, how big a number would have you worried, and what sectors within there?
Well, so if we start to see services industries going closer to 0, and then that would probably correspond to a more increase in the unemployment rate and job losses in these industries, then we would start to think that we are going into a technical recession at least. So I'm not saying this is the base case right now. If you do the math, it probably still shows that GDP for the quarter has increased. But it's weaker. It's also weaker than what the Bank of Canada tell us it would be just 2 days ago.
And with that, where does that leave the Bank of Canada now? Then I think they said no, they're not expecting another drop come December. Where would they be moving next with this?
So that's interesting because they clearly told us on Wednesday that they are on pause. That rates have come down quite a bit, that they can't really offset tariff-related weakness by cutting more interest rates. But they would still be prepared to move downward if there are a significant change in the outlook. Well, the GDP print this morning, and just 2 days after, at minus 0.3, it's already a big deviation from, I'd say, the base case. It's going to take a couple more months. I think we need to see if that downward momentum is sustained. But certainly it puts into question the notion that, as I said, the economy has bottomed and that we are just going through a slow recovery. And so again, we don't think that at this point they're going to consider cutting again in December, or even in January, but a couple more of these sprints, and they're going to have to consider that maybe they have to re-engage into cutting maybe at the middle of next year.
In relation to the longer term, looking down the horizon a little bit, is there one major factor that you're looking at that could really cause a fly in the ointment here, one big pothole that you're concerned about that could really throw this into a number that becomes much weaker than expected down the road?
So taking ahead, I think the USMCA renewal process is our biggest concern. As of now, one of the main reasons why the economy is still afloat and the unemployment rate is still capped at around 7% is that 85% of Canadian exports are untariffed because of the USMCA exemption. And it's very unclear. And if anything, the events of the past week have shown that it's very uncertain if Canada will end up at the end of these negotiations with a free trade agreement. And a baseline tariff of 10-15% on all exports then would really put downward pressure on more industries and would slow down even more the recovery. So unfortunately, my answer as the biggest pothole is this one, and I think it's a very likely one that people, that households and businesses and the markets have to consider.
And I'm just trying to pull up the number. I think we're getting some more details on the numbers. Dominique, you'll just have to forgive me. I'm going to pull out the glasses and take a look at my email here. Didn't want to come up properly. There we go. One of the things I guess that came up, we're talking about the impact of the flight attendants had an issue on that. Can you go into that a little bit? Their strike that they had earlier. What kind of a drag that might have played?
Well, so if that's a drag from the strike, then it's probably somewhat positive because when the strike ends, there will be a rebound in the in that industry, and therefore maybe the minus 0.3 print is not as bad as if it was coming from many industries. However, we need to do the math. I would be surprised if the weakness only comes from the airline strike. And I also want to mention in Canada right now, we are facing many strikes, recurring strike that we haven't seen in a while. And so even if this one is temporary, just in Montreal, we're going to get another strike on the railway system for a full month. So the fact that we have those, I think in the end is putting downward pressure on overall growth, and we need to consider this.
So Dominic, let me ask you a question. Another area of weakness has been kind of oil and gas, mining. It's had some strains as well. What's your opinion on that moving forward?
Oil has been doing fairly well this year. I think oil companies are doing very well. They've been very capital disciplined, and therefore, even if oil prices have moved down this year and even recently, there hasn't been a lot of momentum. They're still doing okay, and it's still expanding. When we look at the number in the GDP, however, it's being bundled with mining, which would involve copper and perhaps other inputs that would go into steel or aluminum, and therefore they're being tariffed, and that's why probably that sector might be struggling. So it's sort of a mixed bag, but in general, we say that oil and gas this year has been a supportive factor for growth.
Okay, and I'm finally seeing some of those numbers. It was down about 0.7% in August. We're out of time right now, Dominic. I appreciate you joining us to talk about this as it broke. I know we're just getting the numbers. You'll have a chance to really read them over the next little while. But thanks very much for joining us.
Okay, thank you, Roger. Bye.
Dominique Lapointe is Director of Macro Strategy for Manulife Investment Management.